I'm a 35-year-old financial advisor by the name of Grace. It was then that I met Jonathan, the man who would later leave me for another woman. I remember our first encounter quite clearly. With an expression of anxiety and a large stack of paperwork, he came into my office. He raised a hand in greeting. "Grace, right. My name is Jonathan. I've heard you're the financial problem solver." I said, grinning, "That's what they say. See if we can unravel yours by taking a peek." Jonathan was a tall man whose short brown hair complemented his warm, friendly eyes that never stopped smiling, even when his lips were sealed in a smile. Our chat drifted from the dull realm of numbers and taxes to our favorite movies, our favorite songs, and even heated arguments about whose pizza in town was the finest as we dug into his papers. With Jonathan's easygoing attitude, the time flew by. He quickly said, "I never imagined sorting out my finances could be this fun." He chuckled when I jokingly referenced my magic touch and said, "How about a coffee to thank you for making this experience far less dreadful than anticipated?" Soon after, their coffee dates turned into dinners and weekend getaways. Jonathan proposed after 7 months, and I immediately said yes. Even though it seemed like a flashbulb romance, it was ideal for us. Our nuptials were simple yet charming. I experienced a deep sensation of having discovered my lifetime companion when we exchanged vows. Mary, Jonathan's mother, was also present. She spoke softly, talking about how excited she was about having grandkids. Married life was blissful at first. Jonathan remained working at his real estate company while I stayed at my firm. We had nice walks, movie evenings, and hearty dinners. However, the calm started to wane as the topic of children came up more often, especially when Mary encouraged it. Her informal remarks quickly evolved into an unrelenting plea for grandkids. It became regular to get phone calls asking how I was doing with my pregnancy and comments made during visits regarding how a kid would complete the family. "Mom, give us some time." Jonathan attempted to joke away the strain, but it just grew more. I tried to be empathetic at first, trying to appreciate her enthusiasm about being a grandma. Still, her constant meddling started to wear thin. I confided in Jonathan one evening, saying, "Your mom needs to give us some space. She seems to play a larger role in our marriage than we do." Jonathan seemed uncomfortable, but he waved my worries away, saying it was only her excitement. Mary's grip on our life grew stronger and went beyond her obsession with her grandkids. She had views on everything, including our eating habits and money management. Jonathan's phone rang one Saturday morning when he and I were having breakfast. It was Mary, and Jonathan placed her on speaker as usual. "Jonathan, how are you both doing with your food?" "Recall that conception depends on a nutritious diet," she stated sternly. While I forced a tight grin, overwhelmed by her constant presence in our life, Jonathan laughed and comforted her. She seemed to be observing everything we did. Any issue was becoming worse, adding levels of stress to our marriage that I had not expected. As Mary's visits increased in frequency, one evening she showed up without warning, carrying a bundle of parenting literature. "Grace, you ought to get into these." She hefted the books onto the coffee table and said, "It's never too early to prepare." I glanced at Jonathan, expecting him to step in, but all he did was shrug. "Many thanks, Mary. We'll have a look," I said, trying to seem somewhat appreciative. Her visits eventually became routine, as though she was closely monitoring us to make sure we were ready for parenting. Whenever she brought up the topic of babies, Jonathan would only nod in agreement. I finally snapped one night after yet another of Mary's intrusive visits. "We need to discuss, Jonathan," I remarked in a frustrated tone of voice. With his eyes fixed on the TV, he inquired, "What's up?" "It's your mother. We're getting too much of her baby talk. Without her meddling, we can scarcely enjoy our time together, I said. At last, Jonathan looked up at me. Grace, she's simply excited. She has good intentions. Excited or obsessed? I shot back. It feels like she's the third wheel in our marriage. Jonathan let out a sigh. She's my mother. What action do you want me to take? Tell her not to give a damn. Jonathan, it's not about compassion. It's about honoring our boundaries and choices. Are you blind to that? We came to an end of our talk when Jonathan did not say anything, turning back to the TV. In fact, things became worse. Mary's visits increased in frequency, and her advice started to encroach more and more. The two of you ought to go on a trip. One day, she said, just relax, it will help with conception. There was another occasion when she casually said, maybe Grace should quit her job to reduce stress. It seemed like she was controlling our life and Jonathan was just going along with it. My own marriage started to feel like an alien place to me. The warmth and compassion that had previously united Jonathan and me were beginning to fade, eclipsed by Mary's imposing presence. The relentless pressure about having a baby was straining us both, leading to more arguments and a noticeable evaporation of the romance that once filled our home. Yet I clung to the hope that things would improve, that somehow we would find our way back to each other. But then everything changed. One evening, Jonathan came home unusually late, his demeanor more somber than I had ever seen. I was in the kitchen, hurriedly preparing dinner when I noticed his state. Jonathan, is everything okay? I asked, concerned. He collapsed into a kitchen chair, burying his face in his hands. We need to talk, Grace, he said, his voice heavy with gravity. A chill ran down my spine as I sat opposite him, my heart pounding with apprehension. It's about us trying to have a baby, he began, not meeting my eyes. Remember those tests we went for? He finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine, filled with an emotion I couldn't immediately place. A few weeks ago, Jonathan and I decided to undergo a fertility checkup, hoping it might ease Mary's relentless pressure. When Jonathan came home that evening, his expression was somber, and I knew the results were in. It's not you, Grace. It's me, he said, taking a deep breath. He explained that the doctor had diagnosed him with a low sperm count, making it unlikely for him to father a child. The news hit us hard, a mix of relief, sadness, and confusion swirling within me. What do you mean? I asked, reaching out to squeeze his hand, seeking to provide some solace. Jonathan's voice broke as he replied, I can't father a child, Grace. He withdrew his hand, a gesture that felt like a wall going up between us. I won't go through treatment. It's not something I'm prepared to face. I was stunned by his refusal. But why? If there's even a slight chance, shouldn't we try? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. It's my decision, Grace. I just can't, he replied firmly, his finality piercing the air. I couldn't wrap my head around his resistance. The Jonathan I knew was always resilient, willing to face challenges head-on. Please don't let this drive a wedge between us. We can face this together, I pleaded. He stood, avoiding my gaze. I need some time alone to think, he said. And with those words, he left the kitchen, leaving me in a whirlwind of unanswered questions and rising fears. His outright refusal to consider any options was baffling. Was his pride really standing in the way of our future together? The following days were tense. Jonathan barely spoke, and when he did, his words were clipped and cold. The growing distance felt like a chasm in the foundation of our marriage, widening with each silent meal and unshared night. Then one evening, the fragile state of our union cracked open irreversibly. Jonathan returned home late again. I lay in bed, feigning sleep, when I heard him on the phone. "Yes, Mom, I got the results." "No, I don't want treatment. I'll figure something out," he whispered into the phone, a conversation he hadn't had with me. It felt like a betrayal, not just of our intimacy, but of our vows. Mary's influence was more invasive than I had ever realized, and as I lay there, tears streamed down my face, marking the silence of our room. Our home had become a shell of the warm, loving environment it once was. We were like two strangers merely sharing the same space, the remnants of our love lost in the shadow of his mother's overbearing influence. Just when I thought our situation couldn't get any more strange, life threw me an unexpected curveball. I had been feeling unwell, attributing it to stress at first, but then I missed my period. Despite the recent news about Jonathan's condition, a part of me dared to hope. I bought a pregnancy test, and sitting in the bathroom waiting for the result was agonizing. Then the indicator showed positive. I was pregnant. For a moment, I was in disbelief. After all the discussions about infertility, this seemed like a miraculous glimmer of hope amidst the ruins of our marriage. That evening, as Jonathan walked in, his usual late self barely acknowledging my presence, I knew I had to tell him. Taking a deep breath, I approached him. "Jonathan, we need to talk," I said, my voice trembling with the weight of our future. He looked up, weary. "What is it now, Grace?" "I'm pregnant," I blurted out, the words hanging between us in a heavy silence. Then he let out a bitter, cynical laugh. "Pregnant? How? The doctor said I can't." "I don't know, but the test is positive. We're going to have a baby," I said, tears starting to well up in my eyes. He stood up suddenly, anger flashing in his eyes. "This is some kind of joke, right? You're trying to trap me." I was shocked. "Trap you?" "Jonathan, I'm telling you, we're going to have a baby." "Our baby." He paced the room, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "No, this can't be. You must have cheated. That's it, isn't it? You cheated on me." I felt as though I had been physically struck. Cheated? How can you even say that? I've been nothing but faithful to you. He wasn't listening, consumed by his rage and disbelief. He shouted, "Get out. I want you out of this house." "Jonathan, please, let's talk about this. We can go to the doctor and get a confirmation," I pleaded, but it was like talking to a wall. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. That night, I slept in the guest room, my mind swirling with emotions. The next day, Jonathan was gone before I woke up. His mother, Mary, showed up instead. The look on her face was a mix of anger and disgust. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Grace, trapping my son with another man's child," she spat. "I didn't cheat on Jonathan. This child is his." I defended myself firmly. She laughed coldly. "Do you take me for a fool? My son can't have children. You're just a gold digger trying to secure your future." I was stunned by her cruelty. This is Jonathan's child. I've never been with anyone else. She moved closer, her voice venomous. "You have 2 weeks to pack your things and leave. And don't even think about asking for alimony or child support. You won't get a dime from us." Mary's ultimatum was the last straw. I knew I couldn't continue living in a house filled with resentment and false accusations. It was time to take control of my life, for my sake and for the baby's. First things first, I filed for divorce. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. Jonathan and his mother tried to make it difficult. They wanted a piece of everything I had, claiming it was their right. But I had a strong case. Everything I owned, all my savings and property, were mine long before Jonathan entered my life. Their attempts to grab what wasn't theirs failed miserably. As for alimony, I didn't ask for a penny. I wanted no financial ties to Jonathan, no reason for him or his mother to interfere in my life again. I was determined to start anew, free from their toxicity. I found a modest apartment, not too fancy, but cozy enough to be a fresh start. Packing up my things from the house was bittersweet. Every photo and every piece of furniture had a memory attached to it, but I was ready to leave them behind. The day I moved out, Jonathan was conspicuously absent. Maybe he couldn't face me, or perhaps he just didn't care. Either way, it didn't matter. I left the keys on the counter and closed that chapter of my life. The first few nights in my new apartment were the hardest. The silence was overwhelming, and the reality of my situation often brought me to tears. But I found comfort in the little life growing within me. Every night I talked to my unborn child, filling my small apartment with whispers of hope and love. Gradually, what had felt like a sanctuary started to feel like a true home. My daily routines brought comfort, and my connection with my unborn child strengthened with each passing day. One afternoon, as I sorted through some old boxes, I stumbled upon a photograph of Jonathan and me in better times. A pang of sadness briefly washed over me, but it quickly gave way to relief. That chapter of my life was firmly behind me. Just then, my phone rang. It was Jonathan. "Grace, I've received the divorce papers," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I'm glad they reached you." "Please handle the formalities," I replied, striving for calm. There was a pause before he added, "I won't bother you about the baby. You won't hear from me again." It was a cold farewell, but it brought closure. Hanging up, I realized that in my solitude, I had discovered a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. I was ready to face the future, not as Jonathan's estranged wife, but as a strong, independent woman and a devoted mother. On a quiet evening, as I sat reading a magazine, my 5-year-old son, Arthur, played with his toys on the floor. Our peace was interrupted by a knock at the door. Puzzled, I answered, finding a woman on my doorstep whose eyes reflected a familiar sorrow. "Hi, Grace. It's been a long time," she said hesitantly. It took me a moment, but then I recognized her as Pamela, a friend from my past life with Jonathan. "Pamela, yes, it has been. What brings you here?" I asked. She looked uncomfortable, glancing at Arthur, who was now peeking curiously from behind my legs. "I thought you should know about Jonathan," she said, her voice soft. Just hearing his name after all these years sent a shiver through me. "What about him?" I asked, maintaining a steady tone. Pamela sighed. "He's not doing well, Grace. After you left, things went downhill for him. He became an alcoholic, remarried a few years ago, and had another child. But the boy was born with disabilities, and Jonathan couldn't handle it. He left them, divorced his wife, and now he's refusing to pay child support. He's in legal trouble." The news struck me, but not in the way Pamela might have expected. I felt a profound sadness, not for Jonathan, but for his child and the woman he had left behind. "That's terrible," I said softly. Pamela nodded. "I thought you should know, given your past with him." I appreciated her concern, but knew I had to maintain boundaries. "Thank you for telling me, Pamela, but that part of my life is over. Jonathan made his choices, and they have nothing to do with me or my son." Pamela looked at Arthur, then back at me. "I understand, Grace. I just thought." I offered a small, sad smile. "I appreciate it, Pamela, but my focus is on Arthur and our life now. What Jonathan does or doesn't do isn't my concern anymore." She nodded, seemingly understanding. "I hope you and Arthur are happy, Grace. You both deserve it." "Thank you. We are," I assured her, glancing at Arthur, now fully absorbed in his toys again. After Pamela left, I closed the door and leaned against it, taking a moment to breathe deeply. The past has a way of sneaking up on you, but I was determined to keep it at bay, ensuring our future remained bright and unaffected by the shadows of days gone by. But I was resolute in my determination not to let the shadows of the past darken the vibrant life I had carefully built for myself and my son. The park was alive that day, buzzing with the laughter of children and the distant barks of dogs at play. I watched Arthur, my heart swelling with pride, as he dashed around energetically, his laughter mingling with the ambient sounds of joy. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the air, chilling my warm feelings. "Grace, is that you?" My heart sank as I turned around. It was Mary, my former mother-in-law, striding towards us with a fixated gaze on Arthur. "Mary," I greeted her coolly. "What are you doing here?" She ignored the frost in my voice, her eyes never straying from Arthur. "He's grown so much. He's your son, right?" "Yes, this is Arthur," I replied, subtly stepping between her and my son. Her eyes sparkled with an unsettling eagerness. "I was hoping to see him. After all, he's my grandson." A wave of irritation washed over me. "And why would you want to see him?" "Well, you know my other grandson," she began, her voice trailing off as her expression darkened. "He's not well. He's sick. It's just not the same. I want to be part of a healthy grandchild's life." Her words struck me harshly, a verbal slap. The disdain in her voice for her grandchild was shocking. "Mary," I said, my voice steel hard, "you have no right to be part of Arthur's life. Not after everything that happened." "But Grace, that was all Jonathan's doing," she protested weakly. I shook my head dismissively. "You supported him. You turned against me when I was carrying your grandchild, and now you speak with such contempt about your other grandson just because he's sick. That's unforgivable." Mary's face hardened. "You can't keep me away from my grandson." "I can and I will," I declared firmly. "Arthur doesn't need someone in his life who values people based on their health. He will not be part of your twisted view of family." She looked like she wanted to argue further, but I cut her off. "This conversation is over. Stay away from us, Mary. Your presence is neither wanted nor welcomed." Taking Arthur's hand, I walked away, leaving Mary standing alone, her face a mix of anger and disbelief. As we walked, Arthur looked up at me, his innocent eyes brimming with questions. "Mommy, who was that lady?" "That was someone we used to know, sweetheart," I replied gently, "but she's not part of our lives anymore." Later, sitting on the porch and watching the sunset paint the sky with warm colors, I felt a profound sense of peace inside. Arthur's laughter echoed as he played, signaling that life had settled into a calm rhythm, the storms of the past now distant memories. "Mom, look what I made." Arthur's voice pulled me from my reverie as he rushed out holding a drawing in his hands. A picture of the two of us smiling under a big bright sun. "It's beautiful, Arthur," I said, pulling him into a hug. "You're quite the artist." He beamed with pride. "I want to put it on the fridge." "Let's do that," I smiled, following him inside. As we walked, I reflected on how far we'd come. There was a time when the weight of the past once seemed crushing, but now it felt more like a distant echo. Later that evening, after Arthur had drifted off to sleep, I sat quietly with a cup of tea, reflecting on the day's events. The phone's ring broke the silence, and I hesitated before answering. "Hello." "Hi, Grace. Kayla is here." All I wanted to do was check in. "How's it going for you and Arthur?" "Kayla, we're doing well." With a smile on my face, I answered, "Arthur's growing up so fast." "I was made aware of your encounter with Mary. Are you all right?" There was warmth and care in her voice. I exhaled. Yes, it caught me off guard, but it's all right. It is only an additional memento of the past. You've come a long way, but I know it's difficult. Grace, you've created an amazing life for yourself and Arthur, and you're strong, she remarked in a supportive manner. Many thanks, Kayla. It has great significance. Her comments were like a warm blanket wrapped around me. We chatted for a while longer about ordinary things, brief but consoling bits of life. This relationship with my sister served as a crucial reminder of my support network, especially on the days when everything seemed overwhelming. I hung up and went to the living room, where Arthur's drawing sat on the fridge, looking pleased. Upon closer inspection, I saw how much we had both matured. Healing and fresh starts had taken precedence over the hurt and rage of the past. I crept over to Arthur's chamber and watched him go off to sleep. I leaned down and gave him a gentle forehead kiss. I said, "Good night, my little artist." I stood back on the porch and watched the stars come up in the night sky. It was true that the memories of the past were fading and losing their grip on me. Hope, a quiet strength, and the unwavering love of a mother for her kid replaced them. This new chapter was about more than simply moving on. It was about thriving in the warmth of fresh starts and the solace of strong family ties.